Welcome, welcome, welcome. KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM with my co-host, Alex Grossman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brien Johnson. How are you
You're
today?
listening to the Ask Brien radio show, and our website is Ask Brien, www.askbrien.com. Still to this day, people say, I spell Brien B-R-I-A-N or Y-A-N. I have no clue. The only way to spell Brien is B-R-I-E-N, and AskBrien.com is the way to learn anything you want to know about business. Now, for people that have never listened to the show, I don't know. I guess you've been missing out, and today is the first day you'll actually be able to learn something about business, and I think the Ask Brien website is just basically an affiliation with the Ask Brien radio show. So Ask Brien concept was created a few years ago, about 2 years ago now. Ask Brien basically endeavors to teach small and medium-sized businesses something about business as often as possible. So within the website itself, we have an expert match where certain people are qualified to become experts. In order to become an expert, you have to have either 10,000 hours of work experience in a specific area, or you need to have some type of awards or accolades so that we know. And those are just minimum qualifications. If you comply with those and you apply, you can become an expert on Ask Brien, AskBrien.com. Now, experts are allowed to post their webinars on a programming schedule so that other users that come onto the site can watch a webinar on accounting or sales or how to set up a website in WordPress. Whatever the issue is, we have a webinar schedule that people can listen to. The experts are also allowed to post videos, blogs, ebooks, and the community itself can ask and answer questions as well as the experts. So it's a really, really good concept. It's teaching people something about business, and the Ask Brien radio show is just a continuation of that. And that's really what it's all about. We're just here to try to teach you something about business. We have a great guest today, has a lot of accolades, is calling all the way from the other side of the country. That's on the East Coast, I believe. And he's got a lot of background, a lot of experience. Matt, are you there?
I am here. How you doing, Brien? How you doing, Alex?
Okay.
Fantastic.
All right. So my first question is, what is your current business that you're in currently?
Well, I run a boutique consulting firm. So after kind of getting out of the corporate world, I found that I like to apply my expertise on a case-by-case basis as companies needed sort of specific areas of assistance, and I've kind of limited it to managing large-scale projects, programs, mergers, acquisitions, that kind of thing, things that really transform a company from one state to another. That's really what we focus on.
And how long have you been doing that?
Well, I've been doing this type of work for about 30 years, a little over 30 years, actually.
You're an old guy.
Large-scale. Yeah, I'm kind of dating myself in there. I started when I was 9, so there you go. I'm 39 now. So I started that about 30 years ago when one of the first companies I was working for out of college asked me to run a $200 million project, which of course I once I got up off the floor found that I actually kind of had a good knack for organizing people and organizing activities, and have then sort of parlayed that into managing just a lot of different types of transformational kinds of efforts. Engineering, IT, organizational restructurings, mergers, acquisitions, just anything that involves taking a lot of processes and from different sources and putting them together to make something work in a more optimal fashion.
Well, 30 years ago, that was what, pre-internet?
Not quite. In fact, as a matter of fact, I still have my original Microsoft Project version 1 5.25-inch floppy disk set. Original box, original labels. If anybody out there, would like to, I'll put it on eBay if somebody makes the right offer.
Well, I'm not sure everyone even knows what a floppy is anymore. Of course, Alex and I do.
We do, but
again, dating myself, and now you guys are dating yourselves. So there you go.
it's true.
So, without telling me the name of that company, how long did you work for that company?
The one I originally started with, the one where I first kind of got into this business?
Correct.
I worked for them for 4 years till I kind of outgrew what I was doing. It was a great challenge. It was also located, I won't say where in the country, but located in an area of the country that was rather cold. And as you said, I've ever since lived in areas where it's rather warm and like that a lot better.
Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I went to the University of Buffalo, so it's very warm there too.
I have a friend of mine who went to the University of Buffalo as well. Now, and he no longer lives there either.
So, now you started your career as a project manager, or did you start out on a different level?
No, I was actually an engineer. I went to college for manufacturing engineering and then got an MBA. And in that role, I started with that company as an engineer, and when they saw I had a knack for managing people and processes and activities, it wasn't quite called, I don't even know if it was called project management back then. I was a project engineer. So I was over a large-scale project, but engineering-oriented. And so I said I had Microsoft project, but I'm not sure if that company had anybody who technically was called a project manager. But that's I sort of evolved into that role. Eventually into higher levels of management, developing and running large-scale PMOs with $100 million a year capital budgets, where I went from managing the individual projects and having them run efficiently to managing large group or portfolios of projects and having them all run efficiently for the companies that I was working for.
Well, that's pretty unusual to start out on day one with a $200 million project, no?
Well, it wasn't quite day one. It was, let's see, I would say I was 2 years into that company when they handed me that. And, yeah, I thought it was rather unusual. I'll tell you this, it was a defense-oriented company, so which might make you think, wow, it's even more unusual. But defense companies are very organized, have sets of processes and procedures and tons of forms. So that management or my role was being guided very well by the processes and procedures that they had in place. So it was a great initiation for me. I could fall back to a lot of other work that the company was doing, as well as the procedures that they had in place, and really spend my time focusing on the organizational components of it.
And that project was successful?
Oh, absolutely. It was used. I can tell you again without giving names of companies or equipment. It had to do with military aircraft, and those pieces of equipment that I was managing the development of were used for quite a period of time, and quite possibly bases of those are still being used today. You know, they evolve continuously, so certainly they're not using 30-year-old technology, but some of the basis of what was developed, some of the software and firmware, I'm sure possibly is still sitting in there.
So what were the lessons you learned from that project?
Interesting enough, the lessons I learned, the biggest lesson I learned actually came from my boss at the time, which was keep yourself out of the weeds. As an engineer and as somebody who loves to tinker with things, because in my personal life I'm constantly building things, in that role, what you don't want to do is you don't want to, in a sense, get your hands dirty. You don't want to take yourself down to what other people are doing, even if you think you know how to do it, and maybe you actually do know how to do it better than they do. One of the things I have taught since then, because I give lectures on project management and program management, and I've taught classes in it. One of the things that I always tell people is that it really is impossible to wear the two hats. It's impossible to be the manager of a program or a project manager, as well as what I call the subject matter expert. So as soon as you try to get your hands and sort of work with the people who have the job that needs to get done, that's when things start falling apart.
So don't micromanage. Rule number one, right?
That was my exact thing that I was going to say.
Yeah, we always think like that. Don't micromanage it. Just understand your role, which is fantastic.
You're listening to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM.
It's actually just a bit more complicated than that, because it's not what in this role you're very often being pushed in that direction. It's not a matter of whether you can just pull yourself out, and that you're certainly correct. You want to keep yourself out of the micromanaging thing, but quite often companies are kind of pushing you, especially because they're always trying to be short on resources. Let's get it done as efficiently as possible. So can't you also do X? And the answer is always no. Even if you have the time, the answer is always no. You always want to keep yourself separate from the people who are actually executing on whatever the activities are.
So I want to tell you a story that I've told Alex before about my cousin. My cousin was working for a defense contractor, and he was an aviation engineer, working on the wings of the airplane. And for multiple months, he was waiting to get the dimensions and the information from the computer department. This is back in the days.
The computer department. I like that.
Well, back in the days when they had the databases with those big cards. They look like time clock cards. And he couldn't get the information, and he was getting a little bit upset. So what he decided to do was he asked the computer guy, listen, I don't know why it's taking so long. I'd like to go back in and show me what's going on. And he went back there, and he spent the whole day there, and the next day, and then he came back with the dimensions for the airplane wing, and within 2 weeks he was transferred to the computer department. So I guess that would be the exact opposite of what you're saying. He did actually go in and micromanage to try to figure out the information. They decided that he was more qualified to be in a different department and move them over. So I don't know if that would be something that you would have not done because of your belief that you shouldn't go into the dirty. How would you have handled it that way, or would you have said, "Hey, that's not my area. Let me deal with my stuff. Let them deal with theirs"?
Actually, I did do. I guess I didn't learn that lesson overnight. So I actually did do very similar to what he was doing, and also because my sort of career progression went exactly opposite to that. I worked in, I guess, what you would have called the computer department, although it wasn't necessarily directly associated with the group I ended up working when I was doing the project management. But I was in there and working with a lot of different people and knew how to get at and do a lot of things. In fact, I got in trouble a couple of times for going a little bit farther than you're supposed to. Even though you come up with a nice result, you know, that you can get your hand slapped for kind of going about it in a way that they don't like. So maybe that's one of the reasons I got moved to the other group. They didn't want me messing around too much down there. They put me in an area where at least they thought I wouldn't dive down into the weeds. And after a bit, I didn't. You know, I just found it to be more effective to do it that way. So I've had to sort of push myself or hold myself back, maybe is a better way of putting it, from doing that. But it's always I always try to be more of a mentor to people who you're managing rather than actually be their direct manager or worse, be sitting alongside of them or taking their job away. It's better to coach them along. Even if you know more, it's better to kind of coach them along to what they need to get at than just doing it yourself because you want to get it done in a hurry.
Well, we know human nature is always the fact that you're going to do some work, and if someone sees you actually do the work for them, you know, whether you're their boss or not, they're just going to sit back and go, "Hey, Matt, go get the work done for me, so I don't really have to do it." Right? I mean, that's human nature for us.
Oh, for sure, and actually, it can be very resentful. You know, if your boss comes down and says, "You know, get out of the way, I'm going to take care of this," you're not going to be too happy about it.
Right.
So I've always, you know, like I said, tried to help somebody do their job better rather than just do it myself. You know, the cost isn't worth it. Getting something done a little bit quicker is not worth the cost to the team environment.
But I would also assume that one of the values of actually being, I'm not going to call you a jack of all trades, but actually having an expertise in those areas that you're managing is valuable. In other words, if you're going to manage something, and I was going to ask that question, how you pick some of your jobs, you know, you manage a number of different projects, but you must have some expertise in some of these projects to make you better at that. Or do you feel now, since you've been doing it for so long, that you no longer need to do that? You can just evaluate it and just do just about anything.
Yeah, I think at this stage, and actually, again, I think it could be actually a detriment to be an expert at the project that you're managing, because then the temptation not only is very great to jump in and change the course because you think it's the way to go. My perspective is it's always being run by a team, that you as the person who's managing it you're not the king, you're not the one who's telling everybody what direction you're going, you're the one who's guiding everybody to come to a cohesive direction as to where you're going. So from my history, it certainly helps that I have expertise in systems implementations and mergers and acquisitions, but at the same time, I never present myself to a client and say, "Oh, by the way, I'm an expert at that, so I can do it for you." I always present it that I can run that type of operation, but I also say I can run almost any kind of operation that involves management, because the key skill that I and the people who work for me bring to the table are their abilities to take that effective operational management and apply it in, I'll say most, I don't want to say all, but most situations that companies need assistance with.
You're listening to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. So my question goes to this. You're the expert. you know how to do whatever project you're working on. You're the leader, and you see somebody that's doing it in the opposite direction. He's trying to put that square into the circle, and it doesn't fit. And you know how to make it work, and he's or she is doing it in the opposite direction. Isn't there an inclination to sit there and listen to have a conversation with them and explain to them? Don't you think it would be better to put the circle in the circle and the square in the square, as a euphemism?
And yes, actually, and that's absolutely the tactic you take. Maybe not quite as directly as the way you're explaining it. In my role, I always try to look at, or have my people on my team look at all the optional directions they can take. Do a pro-con analysis of all the different perspectives. Because sometimes the quickest, cheapest isn't the way you want to go. The longest, most expensive is not the way you want to go. We want to look for what fits the situation, what's best fit for the company. And the project team is just that. It's a team of people who need to also understand what all the options and how those options implicate them. So if one person has a couple of optional directions, it more than likely is going to impact what somebody else's optional directions are. So we try to make all of the decisions. I don't want to say make them as a team, but make them as a team collaboration. So it's usually not one person goes, this is what we're going to do. Let's just say we're picking a language that you're going to write it in. You'd think, well, the head of app dev is the guy who's going to pick that, assuming he's got multiple languages to choose from. If he's heading off in a direction that is not my forte, so I'm not going to equate it to that I would be the one who's saying it. But even at that, I would be the one to say, well, are we sure that's the direction that we think we want to go to? Because invariably other people have an opinion. They're close enough to that. And so I don't want to say we use like a group, we make a group decisioning process, but we do things in such a manner that the options are always being discussed, and it'd be very difficult for one person to say, no, I don't care what you all think, we're going off in this direction. And that's just part of the team environment. If you build the appropriate team structure. I can't say it's been successful 100% of the time. I've certainly had projects where there have been people who have, for whatever reason, the leverage to be able to sort of call their own shot and go down a direction that I and other people don't think is the right thing to do. And if they have that ability or that leverage, then the best we can do is try to make the most of that and continue to communicate out the risks of that direction. That's in the roles I have. That's what I consider to be the highest level of responsibility is communication. What are the risks or the impacts of what's going on?
So that's similar to what we do in product management. You own a product and you say, I'm going to define, these tools we use like MRDs and ERSs. I'm going to define, and again, these three-letter acronyms we love to use in technology. But I'm going to define what the product is and what it's going to do, but I'm not going to tell you how to build it. And so I think that strategy works. But what happens in your role, though, now on the consulting side, where now you walk in and someone says, or hopefully you do this up front, I've got a team, and all they need is a little bit of direction. And you get on there, and I always have this saying, right? A players hire A players, B players hire C players, and C players put your company out of business, right? So what happens when you walk in and the team you find is a C player team? What do you do?
Yeah, that depends, because there's certainly times when the C player team is perfectly respectable to handle the project that's going to be managed. It depends on the project, depends on the priority, depends on the complexity. Every company has A players, B players, and C players, and probably D players, but hopefully the D players are the ones that they're figuring out, how do they rotate them out, right, or into another role or something like that. But you always have the C players who you want to move towards being B and ultimately move towards being A. So the first thing I would have to determine, and this is usually some conversations with the senior management, is, well, do you realize the level of people that you're putting on? Have you chosen this with a flip of the coin? And so I might make recommendations to not necessarily wipe out the whole team, but make changes, because building a cohesive project team is critically important. And one of the first things I do, at least when I enter a project where it's sort of starting from scratch, to your point, you enter the project and there's already a team sitting there. once I evaluate the project and then evaluate the team, then I would make those recommendations to management that says, yeah, we need to maybe pull out a couple of these people and add in a few of these people here. And usually, well, the one thing I really like about being a consultant is management tends to listen to you. I've been in the corporate world where management has not listened, and then some consultant comes in who gets paid twice as much and they listen more. So I don't know if that's the reason, but they tend to listen. So not all the time, but most of the time. So that's how I've approached teams that I don't think are structured quite the right way to have the highest probability of success.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to be taking a break. KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. We'll be right back.
When you're looking for a midnight snack, sometimes fast food just doesn't cut it. California Bakery and Cafe is open 24/7, so you'll be able to find fresh donuts, danishes, bagels, all-natural fruit juices, gourmet sandwiches, and much more at any hour. With elaborate cakes for any occasion, including weddings, baptisms, anniversaries, corporate events, or any special event. California Bakery and Cafe in Santa Clarita is open 24 hours to satisfy any craving anytime. Call us, 255-1254. That's 255-1254.
Facey knows life gets busy. Let us go to work for you in the Santa Clarita Valley. We have 34 primary care physicians and 55 specialty doctors in 4 offices. And Facey has easy 24/7 online appointment scheduling for PCPs and PEDS with some extended hour appointments available. We are Facey Medical Group. Let us go to work for you today. For more information or to make an appointment, visit facey.com. That's FACEY.com.
Hi, Kirk Stinson here with Plumbing by Kirk, your hometown plumber, here to let you know that it's sometimes more cost-effective to have Plumbing by Kirk fix it than to have your husband wrestle with those plumbing problems. And if you play your cards right, you might not have to let him know that we were even there. We invite you to visit our website for free plumbing advice at plumbingbykirk.com or give us a call, 263-6519. That's 263-6519.
My dad is the best plumber ever. Plumbing by Kirk.
With the safe disposal of waste from our homes in the Santa Clarita Valley, Chiquita Canyon Landfill is able to create enough green energy to power 10,000 homes each year. So you can feel good that the waste from your home in the SCV is helping create a clean energy source and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Chiquita Canyon Landfill is our partner in sustainable living.
Chiquita Canyon is helping lead the way to a greener future.
KHTS. Now FM, 98.1 FM, and AM 1220, your hometown station.
Welcome back. You're listening to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM, 1 FM, with my co-host, Alex Grossman.
Thank you there, Brian. That was just very,
I'm actually
very wild today.
I'm auditioning.
It's a new year for you.
No, I want to audition for the for the boxing rink.
You're doing good.
I got the Rocky down, so I mean this would be perfect setting.
Yeah, it's perfect.
All right, we have a great guest. Matt, you there?
I am here. And don't forget the championship wrestling. I think you have a career for looking at that as well.
The World Wrestling Foundation.
It's pretty sad.
I'll be getting a call any day now. Anyway, before we went to break, actually after break, we wanted to go over a couple of issues. So a lot of our listeners are smaller entities. A lot of what we were discussing in the earlier part of the show was project management for companies that could have anywhere from 10 to 1,000 or 10,000 people working for them. They have project managers because there's so many projects. But what if you are just a small business and you're not a corporation, you have a retail location? I always use the furniture store.
Oh, you do?
So because that to me is the most unusual concept from where we're going through. So you're not a corporation, or maybe you are incorporated, but you've got, ma and pa working there, and you got 10 people working the store and a couple people with a truck, and you deliver the furniture. Okay? So, and they may come up with a project. Now, they can't, first of all, for one, they can't select a team like you can at a big company. At a big company, you can select the expert for this, the expert for that, the expert for this. When you're working with 5 people, jacks of all trade, you're hoping that that they'll meet all of your expectations. How would you create a project team for a small group?
Just to use best practices, right? I mean, that's what we need to determine here.
Okay, so what are those?
And especially in a small group, I mean, and with a small group or even a big company, a key component of it is, or key components are, what are the skill sets? In a small company, the good thing is you know all the people, or everybody knows each other. So you will right off the bat know that person is not a team player, or that person is a great leader, or that person knows all about PCs or Macs or whatever systems they happen to be doing, or to whatever project you happen to be doing. So you actually have an advantage in that respect. Of course, you have the disadvantage that, unlike a big company, you're not going to tell 4 or 5 people, hey, your full-time job for the next 3 months is go work on this project. Everybody's going to be doing it sort of in their spare time, or contributing at least in their spare time. Adds a little bit more of a challenge to it, but it really, one of the key things in managing any people or projects is resource management, which means if you say, hey, when you come in the morning, I'd like you to do X. I think the key to being successful is just having all of your activities and goals and objectives identified and laid out. Now, that is going to take somebody, and whether you brought somebody in from the outside to do that, or whether somebody inside, the bookkeeper or somebody who's really adept at kind of organizing things. Either way, you want to look at what you want to accomplish and lay out all the tasks and activities and purchasing items and all those kind of things that have to get done. Then you go look at, well, who are the people who are going to execute on these things? And again, if you have 5 people and one guy drives a truck 8 hours a day, well, how's he going to go and could contribute to this thing? Well, maybe you give him an hour off. He drives 7 hours in the day, and for an hour he works on the part of that project that involves delivery or something along those lines. There's always ways of getting once you're organized, there's always ways of getting towards your solution.
So how do you get organized?
Is it tools? Is it people? Is there something special? Is there magic to that?
No, it's the only magic, and it's not even so much tools. I mean, tools help, of course, but at the same time, I mean, going way back, I organize projects on a paper and a pencil. So these days, everybody's electronically connected. So, but it doesn't take magical software necessarily. Of course, there's a lot of software out there. You can pick up an Excel spreadsheet and organize things. I think the key to getting organized, I mean, finding that person who is an organized type of individual, again, I picked bookkeeper/accountant because they tend to be very organized kind of people, is just looking around and looking at what is my goal? What am I trying to accomplish? And then breaking that down into what we call a work breakdown structure, all the items that need to occur. Now, again, I think in a small shop, using your furniture store example, more than likely everybody knows everything to some level of what happens within that furniture store, from ordering the materials from wherever they come from, or the furniture, to they come in by truck, to they get staged in a warehouse, to blah, 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 all of that kind of thing. So there should be an individual in there who can go through, again, assuming they have the time, and looking at that goal to break that down. Now, that said, if this is a project that is, I'll say, beyond the skill sets of that person or any person in there, then you can effectively bring in an outside individual. I mean, obviously, big companies bring me in all the time to do this kind of thing. That doesn't mean a small company can't do that. You're not going to bring in a team of consultants, but you might bring in just one person to say your job is to organize what we want to accomplish. And as I was saying before the break over there, a good project management person can look in any situation. I can tell you right now, I've never worked in a furniture store. I've certainly bought furniture, but that's about the extent of it. But I'm sure that I could walk into a furniture store and environment and organize what needs to happen in order for them to accomplish whatever that business goal is, which, by the way, that's the number one thing that you want to do, is establish what the business goal is.
Right.
People have a misconception that project management is delivering an item, a computer system or a building or something. Project management's goal is to deliver what a business wants, increased revenue, increased market share, whatever. So everything that we do is tied to some business objective to make sure that whatever is built, whether it's that computer system or warehouse, delivers on what it's supposed to do for the business.
I think you just answered my question, but not every listener understands what the word project management is. So define a project then.
A project is any Any set of activities with a defined outcome. So in other words, and maybe that's the key. Maybe I should have reversed that. You establish what a defined outcome is. I, as a business, I shouldn't say as a business because, like I said, I do a lot of things personally that's crazy enough I organize like projects. But so a business has a goal, and say we want to increase sales. You have to have a mechanism because certainly somebody from the outside isn't going to know what that mechanism is. But we want to increase sales by implementing, I don't want to throw out trade names, but implementing a sales management system. So that's how we want to increase sales. And maybe a company's already done some kind of evaluation. It says we think by using a sales management system we can increase revenue by $10 million a year, whatever the number is. So the project is, the defined goal is implementing a sales system which will generate X amount of revenue per year. And of course, as a project manager or business analyst, you want to validate that those assumptions are true. I've certainly come into a lot of situations where CEOs have made assumptions on something and they weren't accurate, so you might want to bring them down to earth. But so back to your question, so project management is simply taking a defined outcome and then decomposing all the steps, all the activities that need to happen in order to deliver that outcome, and then organizing the resources, the money, whatever else has to be pulled together in order to deliver on that outcome. So a defined beginning, a defined end, and a defined outcome.
That's actually really interesting. I mean, in full disclosure, we had worked together. I had a startup where I was working with a very large corporate company. I mean, they were much larger than us, right? We were a really small startup. I think at the time when we engaged you, we maybe had 12 people. And they had a few hundred, and we had to integrate our IT systems, which were a couple Macs or PCs, into their big SAP system that they had, and I had no idea how to do it. And you came in and said, okay, well, what's your business goal, right? What do you want to do? And we said, well, we want to get paid, and the only way to do that is to, get their IT systems in. And so that was a small engagement, but it was, I never thought I would have brought someone from the outside, but I, again, did what you said. I scavenged through my entire team and realized that everyone I had was fantastic at what they did, but nobody was fantastic at understanding the big IT systems in these large companies. And I think that happens a lot where people, even in smaller companies, will often look and say, hey, we want to be on our own, but we do work with bigger companies. Have you experienced that in other areas as well?
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I've seen exactly your analysis, that you did back then, which, of course, was a smart one, which was to look at what do you want to do? Do I have the resources internally with, A, the capability, and B, the time to be able to do this? If the answer is no to either one of those, then realistically you have to bring in somebody from the outside if you want to have a realistic chance of succeeding in what your business goal is. A lot of companies try to just shoehorn it in. Hey, in your spare time, after you finish doing this, that, and this, and that, I'd also like you to do A, B, and C.
Yeah, we tried
those
that.
Kind of things. that doesn't work too well. And nobody likes to spend money, or excess money, and say, well, I'm going to bring this person in. They cost X amount of dollars. But you do the same analysis like you would if in any kind of sale. You say, how much am I going to make? What is this going to generate for me? And is it worth spending X in order to deliver Y? And once you do that sort of simple calculation, it becomes a yes or a no. You don't want to spend $500,000 to realize a $100,000 benefit. That doesn't make any sense. But so it's a good exercise for anybody who's considering bringing in a consultant for anything, is to just do that sort of cost-benefit analysis on what they're getting out of it.
Well, but that's still a forecast, right? You don't know if that's the right person. Obviously, if somebody hires you, that's fine, but there are plenty of other people that call themselves consultants out there. You bring them on board, and you think they're going to do something, or you think that their background and your conversations with them, that they're going to match what you need, and then they don't. And then that can be a big, big problem for a company, especially a company that's spending a lot of money or more resources than they anticipated. So it's kind of a combination of you have to get the right consultant also. Without the right consultant, you're not going to be there. So what would you look for? I know you are a consultant, but what would you look for if you were a small company and you're trying to bring on a consultant? What would you look for, and what would you have to determine that that's a good consultant for you?
So that's an excellent question, and I'll give you a couple of different answers, both from the perspective of the person who's maybe looking for a consultant as well as the perspective that I do in the management of my business. So from the perspective of looking for somebody as a consultant, obviously this is like hiring anybody. You interview somebody once or twice. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. That somewhat depends on your knowledge of what you're interviewing them for. In other words, do you know enough to ask them the right questions? In my business, that actually would be pretty straightforward for anybody. In other words, you don't need to know, like in Alex's case where he's talking about integrating with a large-scale system. You don't need to know that. What you want to see is you want to ask the question of that consultant. So how would you approach doing this? Because I can tell you right now, you could ask me a question that's within the realm of my consulting practice and say, now, after a 15 or 20-minute conversation, we'll call that the first part of the interview, and say, now, how would you approach managing this thing? Again, whether it's a merger or a company reorganization, I should be able to tell you that, well, here's the steps that I'll follow. I'll be doing this. I won't have the answers, obviously, but if I can't formulate kind of a high-level view of what step-by-step I would be doing to deliver something, then I'm not going to say that makes me bad, but that makes me somebody who doesn't really know the steps required and isn't grasping what you're telling me. Because I can tell you another thing. This is just sort of a project management rule. Basically, when you transition a project from one project manager to another, the view of a good project manager is that you can transition that project in 5 minutes. In other words, if I'm a project manager and I'm leaving for whatever reason, and you bring in a new one, I should be able to transition that project to that other person in 5 minutes.
Detailed information. Good.
Well,
good
the detailed information might be in a SharePoint site or something like that. So obviously, I'm not in 5 minutes. I'm not going to explain all the details, but I should be able to give a view as to here's where we are, here's what we did, here's where all the information, the detailed information on what the team's working on, here's where our goals and objectives are, here's where we've left off, here's where you need to pick up. And a good project manager would be able to pick that up in that 5 minute period of time. Now, still, of course, there's a ramp up. They're going to learn about the company more and things like that, but they'll basically be able to start executing on their job in 5 minutes. So I told you all of that just because, like I said, when you're interviewing that person, using that furniture store example, if you're the president of that furniture store and you say, I want to achieve this by, and I think the best way to do it is by that. Again, even though I know nothing about furniture stores, I should be able to tell you after a 15-minute conversation what steps I would follow and probably even roughly how long that would take. It's going to take me 4 weeks to get to this point, another 2 weeks to get to that point, another 4 months to do that point. So I'm going to now answer this from the opposite perspective, which is me running a consulting company. When I come into a company like that, I always set up an initial engagement that is, what I'm going to do is come in and do this a more detailed level of evaluation. And at the end of that detailed level of evaluation, which might be 2 weeks, might be 4 weeks, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get a detailed scope, view, and plan of what we would do to complete this project. So your investment is relatively little. And in fact, a lot of times I do that at a discounted cost because I say, I'm not going to do it for free, but at the same time I'm coming because the goal, of course, is that you're going to give me the work to continue with it.
Absolutely.
But I want you to see quickly that we've got a good handle on what needs to happen. And on top of that, after 2 or 3 weeks, you've got even if you said we're not going to do it anymore, you've got a solid piece of information you could hand to another consulting company and say, okay, we want you to go do this. Here's the plan laid out and the detailed information that was gleaned in the first part. And since we work on a deliverable basis, if I just, after 3 weeks, said, nah, I got nothing, you don't pay me. You don't pay me anything.
Has that ever happened? Be truthful. Has that ever happened?
You mean, well, I've never delivered nothing. I've had other companies do that.
Oh, wow.
In fact, I've come in several times behind companies who, after 6-8 months, delivered nothing.
Oh, wow.
And I saw, and because I came in, I saw what they did, and it was like, wow, what did you do? What did 8 people do for 6 months? There's nothing here. So again, my thing is communication is the most important thing. People, nasty word everybody says is documentation. I'm not going to say you got to write reams of documents, but being able to communicate what you know and what you want to do is probably the single most important thing. I call it expectation setting. You should always know where I'm at. You should always know where the project's going, always, constantly. So that all involves some level of communication. So a good consulting company should do exactly what I said. You say, can you spend 2 weeks here? Because it could be 2 days, 2 weeks. Of course, the level of detail changes depending on how much time you give it. But I could spend a week and do a preliminary analysis on something, write up something that says, here's what you need to do. You can agree, disagree, but again, what have you invested? A week's worth of expense. Were
you ever hired to do a job like that? You did the analysis and you said, you guys are hitting it on all the strings here. Maybe I could help you here, but I mean, you guys are pretty good.
I'll say no, and not because nobody does it good, is because invariably somebody's bringing my firm in because they know they have, I wouldn't call it a problem. They know they have a goal.
Right.
So I can't say I'm brought in very often to just do a general company evaluation.
Make you feel good, make the company feel good that they did a great job, right?
Yes. And I have had it where somebody said, we need a second set of eyes to look at something, and it was more of a report on something operational. And I guess that would be a yes to that answer. Somebody said, and I've confirmed that, what they thought was going right, and there were no big bogeys out there, waiting to bite them. But I've never had it where somebody said, I want to do something, and I came back and said, no, you're doing it about as good as possible.
So Matt, you're based in sunny Florida, right? But you do work in Southern California. I know that quite a bit, right? And you did work for the House of the Mouse. I know that as well, if I'm allowed to say that. So, so give us an idea. What's your website, Matt?
So the website is www. The name of OSP, the number 3.com. So that's the name of the company, OSP3 Management Consultants. We and do work all over the world, actually. In fact, oddly enough, I do relatively little work in Florida, although I love living here. It's other than some, as you said, certain company and certain entertainment and theme park companies in the northern part of Florida. Do work with them, but most of my work is always taking me and my teams to various parts of the country. Where Southern Florida is not a huge industrial base, so we don't tend to have a lot of things going on here. But that's okay because we do a lot of things remotely, and these days between video conferencing and things, can easily spend 80% of the time working remote and save the company a lot of money on travel. And so it's in a lot of cases companies, in fact, a lot of companies who are our clients, even their own staffs are predominantly remote. So it's not like we can go to some big office building somewhere and, hog up a conference room or something. It's when we do go in, it's usually to give some presentation and work. I always like to do face-to-face because I always like to have a face with a name, and that's why we love video conferencing too. These days with a much better bandwidth than even a few years ago, we can do multiple person video conferences that really almost no need to go into.
We're going to be right back. We're listening to KHTS 1220 98.1 FM.
Your building sign is essential in getting customers to your location. Feathers can help get your business noticed. They walk you through each phase of your building sign project, providing special attention to detail and quality. Feathers will give you a sign you can be proud of. Your building sign will draw customers in instead of having them drive by. Feathers on Soledad in Canyon Country, across from the Edwards Theater. Or go to feathersphoto.com. That's feathersphoto.com.
It's never been so easy to have a great night out. Whether it's a date night or girls' night out, experience Pinot's Palette in Valencia or Encino. Order your favorite drink from the bar and paint your very own masterpiece. No art experience needed. Local artists make it easy for you. So you can paint, sip, and listen to great music while creating a one-of-a-kind masterpiece. Fun, relaxing, and memorable. Pinot's Palette. To book your party, go to pinotspalette.com. That's pinotspalette.com.
Questions about your water bill? SCV Water is available to answer your questions and help you understand your water bill. They can provide the tips and tools you need to use water more efficiently. Visit yourscvwater.com to manage your account and to pay your bill. Their customer service representatives look forward to helping you. That's yourscvwater.com.
Hometown. Your hometown station.
Welcome back, KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM with my co-host,
Say it.
Alex Grossman.
Very good there, Brian. Thank you.
I thought I had to do it, if you're throwing 10 fastballs in your pitcher, you got to every once in a while just give it a little slow pitch.
Love it. Love it.
So we're listening to Matt. He's a I would call him an international consultant. Project management is your specialty. Is that correct?
Yeah, project management, because everything is a project. So there's areas of specialty underneath there that we really boil it down to process engineering, systems implementations, and mergers and acquisitions. There's a million other things you could do in project management. This is be my recommendation for anybody with a business. You stick with what you do best. You go too wide, and then you start getting into things that aren't your bailiwick. And I just like doing things where I know we're going to be successful.
Unless you're Google. Google has enough people. So what is your website address?
It is www.O as in Oscar, S as in Sierra, P as in Papa, the number 3.com, which if you're curious where OSP3 came from.
Absolutely.
2 places. One, it actually stands for Optimizing Business Strategy Through Project Delivery. So that's really what we focus on, where I was saying you always have to have a business goal to run any project. So you have to have a business strategy. Why do I want to do something? And the most effective way to get to what you want to do is by having somebody who really knows how to deliver on it. So that's us. The other half was these days when you look for a .com address, and I've had this business for about 4 years now, you want something that's easy for people to remember and short. And honestly, there's not a lot of short .coms out there anymore. So, luckily my tagline fit with this, and it was available. So easy to remember, and it certainly helps when you're giving somebody the email address.
So we only have a few minutes left, but we had a question from somebody. They're starting a digital agency, and they don't have any expertise in this area. They've got a website, and they've got all the people lined up to do all the production, and they have no customers, no contact list. How would you start?
Oh, that's interesting. So first off, I guess going out, what I would do, and I'm trying to picture myself, when I started my business, I knew the business. I had a big network of people, so that was easy for me to kind of tap into that as well as market myself. If I don't have that network of people, then I'd probably be looking at purchasing some of the contact lists that are associated with that line of business, which are a lot of companies. I get contact all the time from companies who will sell you tailored lists. Here are all the movie studios, here are all the furniture stores, whatever. Any list you want, it's out there. And come up with, now what I didn't understand the question is whether they also had a level of marketing expertise, because what they want to do is put together concise marketing of what they're offering and then push that out to that many people with the whole goal of only trying to get that initial contact, that initial interest. And to back that up, to have a really solid proposal on what you can deliver, why it's of value to whoever it is you're talking to, and that's the part that kind of sells it. When I come in to talk to a client, a lot of times it's just cold. Somebody referred me and said, "Hey, we don't have anything going on, but can you come in and talk to me about what you do?" And when you focus on whatever you have, we can do this in a more efficient manner than you can do yourselves. That certainly piques the interest of the people who we're talking to, and I would imagine in that business it'd be the same thing.
Absolutely.
So basically, start creating a list, and from that list, then try to, I guess, initialize conversations, communication, establish a relationship, and then from there go on and hopefully, if the relationship is started, down the road sell products and services.
Standard sales procedures.
Actually, I would start with that business persona. I would, like I said, understand what you can do and what you can do really well, and you can do that at the same time as you're kind of gathering up the listing part of it.
Set the mission.
But the day you walk in the door, you want to be very clear about what you can deliver for somebody.
Set the mission. I get it. So it's fantastic.
And know your product.
Right.
Yeah.
Always know your product.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, don't be.
Continue.
Be very specific. No, I'd say be very specific. Know your product, but know very specifically what you can do specifically. Don't be vague. In other words, don't say, we're a digital agency. Be more specific than that. Say, here's what we can do for you. We can deliver A, B, and C.
Well, basically, I would think in any business where there's many, many competitors, you want to try to differentiate yourself would be the first goal, correct?
Exactly.
One of your early goals.
Yeah, and sometimes it's almost impossible to differentiate yourself on a like in this case where it's a new business. You can't say, well, we've done work for this company and that company. We have the greatest person over here, but you want to differentiate yourself in how your business is structured. People are brought in a lot by companies when they have a confidence that the company is built well, that the company that they have like you asked the question earlier about interviewing somebody and how do you know they're going to do any good. Well, you're being interviewed when you come into that first meeting, so you have a clear and concise kind of statement as to what you do that drives confidence in the person who's listening to it. So you want to make sure that you've got that.
Now, a good question there, and we only have about a minute left, so you have to make a quick one. Do you meet the people in person, or is it okay to do it remotely? I mean, that's the kind of society we're in, and you're dealing with companies all across the country. So I imagine your first calls are through remote calling, Zoom or something, and then eventually you meet them, or do you actually meet them before you sign them?
Well, the first call is on the phone, but that's purely to set up the meeting. So my goal, I always like my first real meeting to be in person, and I fly all over the country. And a lot of times it's a meeting for 20 minutes and thank you, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, the phone call say, here's what we do, and I'd like to come to your office and talk to you more about it. And we set up a time, and I said almost regardless.
We got to run. I appreciate your help very much. KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM.